Up next, deadly drugs flooding our nation's border. Fentanyl, then heroin at our borders. In just the last year, for example, the amount of fentanyl seized has more than doubled. It's about 11,000 pounds, highlighting the border's crisis's impact on the opioid epidemic. We're just focused on illegals. What about this? Former DEA agent, Special Agent Derek Maltz joins us now. Derek, how much damage does this do? What is significant for the non-drug user watching right now? What's the significance between the two drugs?
Well, first of all, the cartels are in the business to make money, so they can make fentanyl. It's synthetic opioids. It's much cheaper for them to make it, and it's way more addictive, okay? It's more powerful, and it's killing kids at record levels. On Christmas Day, on New Year's Day, we all celebrated. Families were devastated, like 300 a day, devastated because their kids are dead from this poison. Mexican cartel poison is inundating our communities, and the kids are being deceived. We've never seen this amount of Americans killed from an organization across our border. So we have to start treating the Mexican cartels as international terrorists because they are killing our kids at a greater level than any terrorist organization ever.
So the thing that we should keep in mind is that it starts in China. They cut a deal with the Mexican cartels, and they together fought a wide open border, and they're killing us. This is not just because we seem to buy it. This is because they want to kill us and poison Americans.
Brian, this is unrestricted warfare, and they're using the Mexican cartels as a proxy to kill our future generation. Our future military, our doctors, our lawyers, our teachers. We are losing 100,000 Americans a year. 275 to 300 a day. The vast majority is from the poisonous fentanyl. It's not only produced in labs in Mexico and made into the pills, these poisonous pills. Just look at the DEA operation. They seized 20 million pills this year alone. Phoenix, Arizona, on one day, December 14th, they seized 1.7 million pills working with their state and local counterparts. The problem is they're also sending the powder that's made in labs in Mexico into our backyards, and they're making these pills using pill presses in their basements here in America. So we have a very dangerous situation. But, Brian, the cartels and the social media facilitation, they're operating with impunity right now. We need to be much more aggressive. If Al-Qaeda killed 100,000 Americans in a year, what would the U.S. do? Sit back and just allow it? We have to go after these cartels like we've never done before. We have to shut down the labs. We have to shut down the money flow. We have to shut down the chemical flow. We have to put them out of business. We have to stop worrying about hurting the Mexican government's feelings. Remember, the president of Mexico has a philosophy, hugs for thugs, right? We have to keep the thugs, the drugs, and the bugs out of our country. That should be the priority, American public, not right. Mexico, not China. Right now, it's out of control, and we need some aggressive action, Brian.
Yeah, Derek, absolutely. And what they're doing is putting in things like Ritalin. A kid wants to study more, and they'll grab a Ritalin. I don't say it's right, but they'll just do it. They'll say, I want to concentrate. It's for ADD. And they sprinkle fentanyl in there, and it's not a matter of kids doing drugs and doing too many. It's a lot of these people are not drug abusers. They're one and they're done, right? Real quick.
Exactly. Brian, the biggest thing is like Xanax, for example. A lot of kids see mommy and daddy taking Xanax for social anxiety, right? The world is crazy right now with COVID and masks and no school. So they take this stuff. They're depressed. They think they're going to feel better. They don't know they're getting poison from Mexico right in these labs. And like I like to say, this is not overdoses anymore. That's Joe Biden's talking points. This is murder and poison against our kids, and we need to step up, and we need to save these future generation from dying because it's really, really disturbing. I deal with the families, Brian, every day around America, and it's heartbreaking.
Absolutely. This could get Republicans and Democrats together, and it should. Derek, thanks so much. We're going to keep doing this until people listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
All right.
But there's another topic that is front and center for a lot of people because it affects communities across the country, and that is fentanyl and drug uses and drug overdoses and, frankly, the lacing of drugs for people who are even using drugs for the first time. Brian, you had a great segment on this. Drug seizures at the border, you look at 2021 versus 2020, it has exploded. with fentanyl, and it's the first time in quite some time that there's more fentanyl crossing our border than heroin. And Brian, before we hand it over to Rachel and you did a great interview with Derek Maltz, who's a former DEA special agent. And he broke down the fact that this is not just a fentanyl problem and not just a Mexico problem. This is a China problem, something they're doing intentionally. Take a listen to what Derek had to say.
Restricted warfare, and they're using the Mexican cartels as a proxy to kill our future generation. Our future military, our doctors, our lawyers, our teachers. We are losing 100,000 Americans a year, 275 to 300 a day. The vast majority is from the poisonous fentanyl. The cartels and the social media facilitation, they're operating with impunity right now. We need to be much more aggressive. Mexican cartel poison is inundating our communities, and the kids are being deceived.
Brian, this interview that you had was so eye-opening. In fact, it was mind-blowing to me. I've always been concerned about the drugs coming over the border. I've been talking a lot on this show and other shows about my concern about the destabilization of Mexico, because I believe it's turning into a narco state. I've been very concerned about the human smuggling. I've called Joe Biden the human trafficker in chief because I'm so worried about what's happening to the kids. But this was a threat I had not thought about, which is that this alliance between the cartels and the communist Chinese government to basically flood our border and poison our young people with this drug is actually a national security threat, Brian. This is, we need to relook at this in an entirely different way.
This is a multifaceted attack of China. I mean, China's trying to neutralize us and our allies in the South China Sea. They formed a trade alliance on a different note that left us out of it. At the same time, they're trying to poison us with fentanyl. And I know a lot of people say, well, you know, I'm not on drugs. I don't just go buy drugs, and my kids don't buy drugs. But there's so many things that use the term, Pete, laced. This is laced into other drugs that are help you get to sleep or help you concentrate. I don't subscribe to it, but people I know in college were using Ritalin because it helped them focus and study longer. Or they might use some type of amphetamine in order to stay up late to study. These aren't bad kids hanging out with a bad crowd who have lost their way. These are people living everyday life. All of a sudden, the suburban mom and dad go, what happened to my kid? He had no drug problem. Because this stuff was laced with fentanyl, illegally brought across our border. When it starts getting into prescription drugs, then it'll be everybody's problem. But a true president would understand a unifying issue. China. What's happening with illegal drugs infecting every bracket, working class, middle class, upper class. It is fentanyl. I'm going to crack down and I'm going to use leverage with Mexico in order to do that. I'm going to hurt them with trade like the president did, risk a bad relationship because the only thing they'll understand is money. So if you're going to do that and help them crack down on the cartels within their borders, at the same time you reinforce border, that's called leadership. Do you notice I didn't say Democrat or Republican? It's called leadership. And that's what people can't understand. What's happening at the border is not pro-Hispanic. It's not Democrats being open to immigrants. It is letting down America. And the reason why Donald Trump got more Hispanic votes and why Republicans are picking up on hyperspeed right now is because Hispanics want to be Americans. They're not for illegal immigration. And part of the illegal immigration is the drug trafficking, human trafficking that's bringing drugs here. It is all related. And I dare to say at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, they're not even trying.
No, they're not. And the Communist Chinese are executing what your guest aptly described as full spectrum warfare, whether it's economics, whether it's a virus, whether it's drugs. They're coming at the United States of America and want the future to be that
Pete,
of the Communist Chinese.
That's the problem with. I apologize. I didn't mean to step on that, Pete. That's the problem with electing a president who I believe is compromised. And that is why Hunter Biden's laptop and all the information on those emails is still so relevant. He has not been held accountable. There are still many questions about why on a whole bunch of fronts he hasn't confronted the Chinese. But this is a new one that I think Americans need to pay attention for. Great interview, Brian.
All right. Thanks, guys.